The man who unmasked the devil. There are stories people whisper late at night about haunted alleys, abandoned houses, rooms where lights flicker without cause. But sometimes, the most terrifying ghosts are still alive. And sometimes, the devil wears a human face. In the heart of the city behind the sirens and the neon lights there exists a secret unit. Not just any police team. These are for specialists, handpicked from across the nation, trained to deal with the darkest side of human behavior. They call themselves the Black Unit. Their job is not just to catch criminals. It's to dive into the twisted minds that normal detectives avoid. Murderers who kill with rituals. Crimes that follow no logic. Patterns that scream of madness. And this is where our story begins. It started with a phone call. 3:12 a.m. rain tapped softly against the windows of the unit's main office. Inspector Vu Dai Kan, the oldest in the team and a legend in behavioral profiling, answered the call. His face hardened as he listened. "Where?" he asked. "Abandoned flower market, District 9, old warehouse." "What's the condition?" A pause. "It's not something we've seen before, sir." Scene of the crime. By the time they arrived, dawn was still a few hours away. The warehouse stood like a forgotten skeleton in the rain, its metal frame creaking with each gust of wind. Inside, the stench hit first, then the silence, and then the horror. Lying on a wooden chair in the center of the warehouse was the body of a young woman. Her eyes were gone, hollow sockets stared upward. Her mouth was stitched shut with black thread tight, cruel and deliberate. Her hands were tied with red silk ribbons. Around her neck hung a card. She saw what she shouldn't. The unit stood frozen. Detective Mai Lin, the youngest and a specialist in forensic psychology, whispered, "This isn't just a murder, this is a performance. Signs of the supernatural." For most people, it might have looked like the work of a sadistic killer. But something felt wrong. Off. The temperature inside the warehouse was unusually cold for a rainy night. Lynn walked closer, holding a thermal sensor. "No heat signature," she murmured. "This body's been dead for less than 5 hours, but there's no residual warmth." More curious, thought there were symbols drawn in ash around the chair. Circles, triangles, a star inside a square. Detective Bach, exorcism historian and part-time lecturer in ancient symbology, kneeled beside the markings. "This is old, very old. These are symbols from a forgotten sect in northern Vietnam. They believed in binding the soul of the victim to silence." Meaning, Inspector Kan asked, if the mouth is sewn, the soul can't scream. If the eyes are removed, it can't witness the afterlife. A chill ran through everyone's spine. The girl with no eyes. Back at headquarters, the team began digging. No ID on the girl. No fingerprints in the system. No missing person report matching her face. The only thing they had was a faded tattoo on her wrist. A small rose with 3 thorns. Mai Lin tracked it. 3 hours later, she whispered, "I found her." Her name was Nguyen Thi Mai, 22 years old. She disappeared 3 days ago on her way home from night classes. Her roommate said she was afraid of someone or something. She kept saying she was being followed, the roommate told them, but no one believed her. "We thought she was just stressed out, but then she stopped sleeping." She locked her room from the inside and started putting salt under the door. The roommate broke into tears. She said she saw something, a man who wasn't fully human, the faceless man. As the team looked into the girl's final days, patterns emerged. Security footage from her university showed a man in black clothing trailing her, but every time the camera tried to focus on his face, the image blurred. Other students claimed to have seen him too. "He was always just there," one whispered. But when you looked directly at him, it felt like he wasn't real, like he wasn't supposed to be in this world. Some even claimed they saw a shadow like hands stretching out from behind him. Urban myth, mass hysteria, or something darker? Return to the warehouse. The team returned to the crime scene with equipment for spectral readings something Bach had requested. The air, though damp from the rain, now felt charged. They brought in spiritual medium Madame Heen, an elderly woman who had once helped solve the train station murders. By claiming to speak to the dead, she stood in silence beside the empty chair. Then her voice trembled. "She's still here." Everyone froze. She's trying to speak, but something's holding her back. Suddenly, all the lights inside the warehouse blinked and the chair moved. Just a few centimeters, but it moved. Madame Heen collapsed. It's not just a killer. He's called something. Something old. Something that demands silence. A message in the eyes. An autopsy revealed something shocking. The girl's eyes hadn't been ripped out. They had been removed surgically with precision, almost lovingly. But here's the real horror. Inside each eye socket, the coroner found something unusual. Small pieces of paper, one with a line from a poem. The blind can still see what the ignorant deny. The others simply read, "He is watching, and now so are you." Who was he? The photographer who vanished. Digging deeper, the team found that Mai had visited an underground art gallery days before she vanished. The gallery specialized in dark art photographs of haunted places, twisted mannequins, shadow art. The owner, a man named Fan Du, had gone missing a week earlier. His apartment was unlocked. Inside, hundreds of photographs were hung on walls. All of them had one thing in common: a figure in black. In every photo, he stood somewhere in the background or looking at the camera, but always present, sometimes in a corner, sometimes reflected in a mirror. Once standing behind Fan Du. In the last photo, the one still in the camera, the figure was closer, right behind Mai, almost touching her. Voices from the mirror. Back at the station, strange things began to happen. Detective Lin saw movement in the mirror, but no one was behind her. Bach started hearing whispering voices during interviews, and can found the same symbol from the warehouse carved into his desk overnight. What if this isn't just about murder? Lin asked. What if something darker is guiding the killer? Conclusion: for now, the case remains unsolved. Officially, it's ruled as a homicide. But within the Black Unit, they know better. This wasn't just the act of a madman. It was a message, a performance, a warning, the first of many. Because that night, as they closed the file on Case 01, the girl with sewn mouth, another call came in. Another body, another symbol, and the same message. He is watching. The teacher and the little red chair. There's something inherently innocent about children's laughter echoing through school hallways. The tiny desks, crayon drawings, the smell of chalk dust and lunch boxes. A place where learning begins and fear should never belong. But what if the most haunted place isn't an abandoned house or a forest whispered about in folktales? What if it's a classroom? The case file, Red Chair Murders. The second case that landed on the desk of the Black Unit was one that no one wanted to touch. Not because it was complicated, but because it was too close to home. A small town in the province of Diete had reported a series of strange child disappearances. Over 2 years, 5 children between the ages of 6 and 8 had vanished after school. All from the same class, all with no witnesses. Then, one day, a shallow grave was found in a pine forest near the edge of town. Inside were the remains of all 5 children. Their bodies were seated in a circle, each holding a broken crayon. In the center of the circle was a small wooden chair, painted red. now faded with time and streaked with something darker than paint. Blood. The chair had been placed like a throne. Whoever sat there was the king of this horror. Arrival in Diete. Inspector Vudaiken and his team arrived quietly. The townspeople were already on edge. Some believed it was the work of a cult. Others whispered of a ghost, the Red Child, that haunted the old pine grove. They warned the team not to go out at night, especially near the school. But the black unit wasn't looking for spirits. They were looking for the human behind the mask. Detective Mai Lin immediately noticed something odd. The grave site was just a few hundred meters behind the local elementary school Truong Tu Hak Hoa Ben 3. That suggested familiarity, knowledge, someone who didn't need to scout or search, someone who belonged there. The beloved teacher. All signs pointed toward a familiar face in town, Mr. Don Quoc Bao, a 58-year-old primary school teacher with over 30 years of service. Respected, soft-spoken, still unmarried. He had taught all 5 missing children. He had even given eulogies at the small memorials. Everyone trusted him. Everyone. But when the team questioned him, something felt off. He answered calmly, too calmly. Not a flicker of emotion when asked about the children. When Mai Lin asked about the chair, he simply smiled and said, "Oh, every child has a favorite chair, don't they?" But something in that smile made her skin crawl. The red chair. The real horror began when they searched his home. In his attic, under a dusty cloth, they found it. Another red chair. Not the one from the grave, but identical. A perfect match. Next to it were dozens of old school notebooks, scribbles, stick figures, drawings of classrooms where every child was faceless except always smiling, always sitting in the red chair. That child was always him. Mr. Bao as a boy. The forgotten file. Detective Bach uncovered something strange in the town archives. A tragic fire at Trong Tu Hak Hoa Ben 1, 42 years ago. 3 children died. The sole survivor? A young boy named Don Quoc Bao. His teacher at the time was under investigation for abuse, but the case was buried. When the school burned down, rumors suggested that Bao had been locked in a closet for being difficult. Others claimed he witnessed the death of his classmates and was found still hugging a burned red chair in the rubble. Whatever happened that day, it changed him forever. Interrogation. When presented with the evidence, Bao didn't run. He didn't cry. He simply said, "They took my childhood. I only took it back." He spoke of fixing the past, of finding the perfect children who smiled, who listened, who wouldn't bully or judge or ignore him like the others did. He recreated the classroom of his memory. They didn't scream, he whispered. They just sat. It was peaceful, just like before the fire. He was charged with 5 counts of premeditated murder. But the case wasn't over yet. The ghost of Classroom 4B. After Bao's arrest, the school was closed temporarily. But strange things began happening. The janitor swore he saw chalk writing appear on the blackboard in room for Bevan. When the room was locked, a message, "I want to go home." Teachers reported hearing the creak of a chair moving by itself. Children said they heard crying in the bathroom, but when checked, it was empty. And one night, the school's new headmaster saw a red chair sitting in the hallway. By morning, it was gone. A visit to the grave. Detective Lin returned to the grave site alone. Something had been bothering her: the position of the children, the crayons, the calmness in their posture. It didn't look like a killing field. It looked like a reunion. Each crayon matched the drawing style of Bao's childhood notebooks. The way they held them suggested they were placid carefully, not violently. As though, even in death, he wanted them to be happy, to be a part of his perfect class. But that wasn't the most chilling discovery. Lynn noticed something on the back of the red chair in the center. Carved in shaky letters, "I was here too," and next to it her own name, Lynn, the forgotten student. Terrified, she returned to the station. She dug into the school's transfer records. To her shock, she discovered a fact she had buried deep in her own memory. When she was 7, after her mother died, she lived with a relative in Diete and attended Trong Tu Hak Hoa Ben 1. For 3 months, she had been in Bao's class, and then the fire happened. She never spoke of it again. Her memory had blocked it out. But she remembered one thing now: a red chair, and the feeling of someone watching her from the dark. Conclusion for now: Mr. Bao remains imprisoned, but unrepentant. The school reopened, though room for B was sealed off permanently after a second janitor quit, claiming he saw 5 children sitting silently inside during his night shift, each holding a crayon, each staring at the red chair in the middle. And though Bao never spoke her name again, Detective Lin sometimes wakes at night, hearing a whisper, "You never said goodbye." The black unit closed Case 02, the red chair murders, but the town still refuses to use red chairs in classrooms. They say it's bad luck. They say the ghosts might come back if someone sits in that chair again. And maybe, just maybe, they never left. The eyeless doll and the 27-year obsession. Some say madness is a slow descent. Others believe it comes suddenly, like a switch being flipped. But what if the madness is not yours? What if it belongs to something watching you for decades? The Confession. At precisely 2:47 p.m. on a cloudy Thursday, Nguyen Thi Lan, 61 years old, walked into a police station in Vin City. She wore a faded brown dye, her gray hair tied back, her hands shaking as she clutched something tightly in her arms. The officer behind the desk didn't know what to say. Lan didn't wait. She never left. She's still in the walls, still crying. The object she held, a porcelain doll, pale, cracked and missing both eyes, entered the black unit. When word of the confession reached Hanoi, the black unit was immediately dispatched. Inspector Vu Dai Can knew better than to ignore an old woman's story, especially one involving death, delusion, and a doll. They found Lan already transferred to a psychiatric facility. The doctor said she spoke in riddles, sometimes in third person, sometimes in whispers. But the one phrase she repeated was, she said she wouldn't close her eyes. So I helped her. No body, no name, no time. The problem was, there was no murder on record, no missing person, no complaints filed 27 years ago. Lan had lived quietly in an old French-style house on the outskirts of the city, widowed early. No children, no neighbors who remembered anything unusual. But the team went to her home, and that's when things turned strange. The house with no clocks. Detective Mai Lin was the first to notice it. There wasn't a single working clock inside. All were frozen. Same time, 11:06. In the attic, dust lay thick like untouched snow. But in the far corner, under a heavy cloth, they found a small wooden bed, child-sized, and beside it a pile of porcelain doll parts, all headless, limbless, some missing eyes, all placed with care. On the wall above the bed, old crayon drawings, stick figures, always two, one tall, one small, and a sentence written in childish handwriting, over and over. I didn't want to disappear. The doll. Forensic testing on the eyeless doll Len brought to the station revealed something disturbing. Beneath the porcelain, teeny fragments of human bone, specifically from a child. The eye sockets weren't just missing, they had been carved out. Bach, the black unit's symbol expert, noticed faint markings on the doll's back, an old protection sigil. used in northern mountain villages to trap spirits inside objects. But the symbol was incomplete, which meant whatever was inside was not contained. Interview with a ghost. Back at the psychiatric ward, Ken questioned Lan directly. He showed her the doll. She smiled, almost lovingly. She didn't like to sleep, always asked questions, always watched. Even when I turned off the lights. Who was she? Ken asked. Lan's eyes filled with tears. A mistake. Lin leaned in. Was she your daughter? A long silence. Then, no, she was delivered to me, wrapped in red cloth. A thank you gift from someone I once helped. A village that doesn't exist. Digging deeper, the team discovered something chilling. In 1997, Lan worked briefly as a volunteer midwife in a remote Hmong village near the Laos border. She stayed there only one season, then returned to the city, never speaking of her time there again. But when Lin tried to locate the village, she found no record of it. Not in old maps, not in government archives, just a blank spot in the forest. But in local folklore, there was mention of a hidden village cursed by a spirit called NTM, the one who never blinks. A child ghost who possessed dolls and punished those who refused to honor her gift. Who was the girl? No birth certificate, no adoption papers, no photos. But neighbors from the late 90s remembered one thing. Lan, once alone, suddenly began shopping for children's clothing, milk, toys. A woman who once avoided children was suddenly a mother, yet no one ever saw the child. Only sounds. Laughter at night, the rustle of small footsteps, a song hummed from the attic, and one chilling memory. A neighbor's child once snuck into Lan's yard, chasing a ball. She came back pale, trembling. She said a little girl with no eyes asked if she could play. The wall that bled. Lin returned to the attic with a team. Behind the crayon drawings, they found a hollow spot in the wall. Breaking it open revealed a nightmare. A small skeleton wrapped in a red blanket. Tiny, curled in the fetal position. Inside the rib cage, pieces of porcelain, hair strands woven into fabric, and clutched in the child's hand, a single glass eye. Autopsy revealed the child died from asphyxiation. No bruises, no cuts. She had simply stopped breathing, as if something had slowly suffocated her from the inside. Lan's final words. When they told Lan about the discovery, she smiled. See, she never left. Then her expression darkened. You think I killed her, but you don't understand. She chose to stay. She was never meant to grow. Just to watch, just to wait. What was she? Ken asked. Lan leaned in close. A mirror. She shows you what you fear most, and once you see her, she never stops watching. The footage. Back at headquarters, Lin reviewed body cam footage from the attic, frame by frame. In one frame, just before the wall was opened, there it was. A figure standing in the corner, small, childlike, no eyes. Gone in the next frame. But Lin swore, in that moment, she felt it. Not cold, not fear, but recognition. Conclusion for now. Nguyen Thi Lan passed away in her sleep 2 days later. The doll was sealed in evidence storage, though rumors persist that it sometimes moves positions on its own. The child's body was buried anonymously. But my Lin still dreams. In every dream, she stands in a dim attic, and across the room, a child sits on the wooden bed, smiling and whispering, I see you. The black unit closed case 03, the eyeless doll, though not without scars. Because in their line of work not all ghosts float. Some stare, some wait, and some are made not born. The mask of goodness, the return of the evil. In every town, there's a man everyone trusts. The one who donates to charity, who volunteers at shelters, Who takes care of children? The face of kindness, the symbol of hope. But sometimes that face hides a secret, and sometimes the most terrifying monsters were the kindest masks. The daylight kidnapping. It was a bright afternoon in a quiet neighborhood of Ha Long City when the world shattered. A young boy named Min, age 7, vanished from the playground. No screams, no witnesses, just an empty swing swaying gently in the breeze. Panic spread quickly. Police searched everywhere. The community rallied. A man named Mr. Than, a local businessman and philanthropist, organized search parties and donated funds to the family. His voice was calm on the news, his smile reassuring. Everyone loved Mr. Than. Everyone, that is except the black unit. A man beyond suspicion. Inspector Vudaikin was skeptical. Mr. Than was known for his charity work, especially with children's programs. He hosted festivals. He gave scholarships. He was a pillar of the community. But the evidence told a different story. Security cameras near the playground caught a shadowy figure. The footage was grainy, but the man's gait, posture, and even the way he held his hands were unmistakable. It was Than. When questioned, he denied everything. He said he had been home, working late, but his alibi didn't hold. The disappearing trail. The search for Min grew desperate. Days passed. Then, a strange message arrived at the police station. A small box wrapped in red cloth. Inside was a "Doloni I'm missing," the other cracked. Attached was a note. "He watches but never sees. Find me before the mask slips." The handwriting was unfamiliar but unsettlingly precise. The black unit knew they were dealing with a mind far darker than a simple kidnapper. The face behind the mask. Digging into Than's past, the team uncovered chilling details. 20 years ago, Than had been investigated for a series of disappearances in a neighboring province. But the charges were dropped. Witnesses recanted. Evidence vanished. It was as if he was never there. The team also discovered Than's obsession with masks, both literal and figurative. He collected ancient masks from forgotten tribes, each symbolizing a different personality. His favorite, the white mask of purity, the double life. Detective Mai Lin interviewed locals who knew Than before his rise. He was different back then, an old friend said. Quiet, withdrawn. People didn't trust him. One former employee told the team about the basement of Than's old house filled with dolls missing eyes, hands, and sometimes heads. "I quit after I saw the collection," she said, voice trembling. "It felt like they were watching me." Supernatural whispers. At the same time, strange things happened around Than's current home. Neighbors reported hearing soft crying at night. Doors creaked open on their own. A neighbor saw a figuresmo, childlike, watching from the garden. But whenever they looked closer, it vanished. The confrontation. The black unit planned a sting operation. They placed hidden cameras around Than's house, waiting. One night, footage captured Than entering the basement carrying a small, struggling figure. The figure was Min. The boy's eyes wide with terror. Than's face was calm, almost detached. He whispered, "You belong here now. Forever safe, forever mine." The mask slips. The next morning, Than was arrested. But during interrogation, something broke inside him. He spoke not as a man but as a different entity. "I don't harm them. I protect them. The world outside is cruel." His eyes flickered with a cold, unnatural light. Ken asked, "Why kidnap children you claim to protect?" Than smiled darkly. "Because I must keep the mask on. Without them, I am nothing." The haunting truth. Than's basement was searched. It was a nightmare. Walls covered in drawings of children. Whispered prayers etched into the concrete. and dolls, dozens of them, each missing a piece, each holding a symbol of broken innocence. Experts believed Then was possessed by a spirit that demanded sacrifice, a demon feeding off the corrupted souls of children. Breaking the curse, Madame Heen, the medium who helped before, was called again. She performed a cleansing ritual, warning that the evil inside Than was ancient. The mask hides a curse. Only by breaking it can we save the souls trapped. Aftermath. Min was rescued but forever changed. He wouldn't speak of what happened in the basement. The town healed slowly. Than was imprisoned, but remained a shadowy figure, sometimes seen whispering to the walls, and sometimes smiling with eyes that weren't his own. Conclusion for now. The Black Unit closed Case 04, the Mask of Goodness. But the question remained, how many more monsters hide behind the masks we choose to trust? Because sometimes, the greatest evil is the one we invite in. The corpse in the fish tank, and the devil's confession. In the quiet neighborhoods of Hue, a strange scent began to seep through the cracks of an old apartment. A mix of dampness, decay, and something far darker. No one dared enter until the police were called. The discovery. It was an elderly neighbor who first noticed the smell, thick and clinging, lingering in the hallway. She reported a strange behavior from her younger neighbor, Tran Min Hai, a quiet man rarely seen outside his apartment. When the police arrived, they found the door locked from the inside. The officers forced entry. Inside, the apartment was untouched, except for one horrifying detail. A giant fish tank stood in the corner of the living room. Inside, floating eerily, pale and motionless, was the body of a young woman. Her eyes closed, her skin translucent, her hair swayed in the water like dark seaweed. The man's confession. I was found sitting silently on the floor, eyes hollow, hands shaking. When questioned, he confessed calmly, "She's still with me, always with me. I didn't want to let her go." The woman was identified as Lin, Hai's girlfriend who had disappeared months ago. Hai admitted to killing her but claimed it was out of love. "I wanted her near me, to never leave, to always be visible, even when the world was cruel." A relationship twisted. The Black Unit arrived, unraveling a story soaked in obsession and darkness. Hai and Lin met 2 years earlier. Their love was intense, fast, and full of promises. But slowly, Lin began to pull away. She felt trapped, suffocated by Hai's possessiveness. She tried to leave. Hai couldn't accept it. The night she disappeared, he confessed to a violent struggle. But instead of reporting it, he chose a twisted sanctuary, the fish tank prison. Hai had meticulously prepared the tank. It was large, made for exotic fish, equipped with heaters and filters to keep the water clear and fresh. For months, he cared for Lin's body as if she were Alavi, feeding the fish around her, talking to her, even dressing her in different clothes. The neighbors heard whispers through the walls, soft lullabies, cries that could not be comforted. Supernatural elements emerge. After the arrest, strange events haunted the apartment. Officers reported shadows moving in reflections, whispers in the silent rooms, and once, a police officer swore he saw Lin's face in the water, eyes opening briefly, staring into his soul. Madame Heen, summoned once more, performed a cleansing ritual. She warned, "This is no ordinary spirit. It's caught between love and rage, between life and death." The boundary blurred. What haunted Hai was not just guilt. It was a presence, a dark entity feeding on his obsession. Each night, Hai's dreams were invaded by a faceless woman, sometimes pleading, sometimes screaming, sometimes silent. He claimed she spoke to him, told him she was trapped, that she wanted release. The final confession. In a haunting interview, Hai whispered, "I thought love meant holding on, but now I see I was holding her soul captive. He begged for forgiveness, but in the depths of his eyes, something else lingered. A shadow, a demon whispering, "Hold on longer." Aftermath. Lynn was given a proper burial. The fish tank was destroyed, but the apartment remained cold and silent. I was sentenced, but those who visited him spoke of strange murmurs. The black unit closed case 05, the corpse in the fish tank, but the echoes of love and possession remain, because sometimes love can be the most terrifying cage of all. The silent blade when a genius becomes a killer. They called him a prodigy. Ethan Lynn was only 23 when he made headlines for decoding a decades-old encryption used by military-grade satellites. His professors at university called him the brightest mind of his generation. Calm, precise, and always composite was the kind of student every institution would brag about. But no one saw it coming. No one could have imagined that the same hands which solved quantum algorithms would later carve through human flesh with surgical precision. It all started with a body, a murder without a sound. The first victim was discovered in the dormitory laundry room, room B12. Behind the chemistry building, a female student named Clara Hughes. No signs of forced entry, no screams, no blood splatter. Just her body lying there, with a thin red line across her neckline, dry and hauntingly perfect. The kind of cut you'd see in anatomy textbooks. Detective Vera Mendez was called in. She'd worked homicide for over 12 years and thought she'd seen it all. But this was too clean. No struggle, no DNA, no motive. She didn't even drop the towel in her hand. One officer murmured. Vera nodded. "That's not a killer, that's a technician." Autopsy revealed something chilling. The cut had been made post-mortem, precisely 3 minutes after Clara's heart stopped. Who would wait for the heart to stop, and why? Patterns began to form. The second victim was a TA in the physics department. Same method, same eerie silence, same absence of struggle. Rumors spread across campus. People spoke of a ghost in the university. Some said it was Clara's spirit, haunting the halls. Others believed there was something more sinister, an invisible entity. A curse from one of the research labs. But Vera wasn't buying the supernatural. Ghosts don't leave behind surgical incisions, she muttered as she stared at the second autopsy report. Still, there was something unusual. Each victim had a connection to one lab, Project Orion, a controversial neuroscience initiative funded by private defense sectors. The lead student on the project, Ethan Lynn, the genius in question. Ethan lived in the upper-level dorms, surrounded by walls of books, code scribbled on whiteboards, and a massive tank filled with jellyfish. He barely socialized, rarely spoke more than necessary, and seemed unfazed by the panic on campus. When Vera first questioned him, he was polite but almost too controlled. "We're just trying to unlock patterns in human behavior," he said calmly. "Through psychology? No, through mapping neuron firing and prediction of violent tendencies based on AI simulations." Vera noticed his hands. Not a single tremor, as if stress didn't register. "Where were you the night Clara died?" "I was here, running code on sleep cycles and behavioral shifts." "Can anyone confirm that?" "No one was with me, but the system logs will show it." The logs did check out, but something felt off. The third murder changes everything. Then came the third body, a professor, Dr. Ames, the head of Project Orion, killed in the exact same way, in his own office, locked from the inside. This time, there was a clue. Under the professor's desk was a small note, scrawled in Latin, "Fiat voluntas ius," let his will be done. It was Ethan's handwriting, confirmed through multiple samples. But he denied everything. "I don't remember writing that," he said. staring blankly. Maybe I was sleep deprived. Maybe someone's copying my style. His voice didn't shake. His pulse didn't rise. But Vera's instinct screamed. He knows more than he says. Dark roots of a brighter mind. Digging deeper into Ethan's past, Vera uncovered something chilling. As a child, Ethan had been part of an off-the-grid gifted children's program Project Novashut down after allegations of psychological conditioning and illegal experimentation. Participants were trained to detach emotion from logic, taught through harsh simulations to prioritize outcome over morality. The doctor in charge, Dr. Ames, and Clara, she was his assistant. He was part of a group trying to reopen NOVAS data for public scrutiny. Vera put the pieces together. Was Ethan eliminating anyone threatening to expose his past? Or was something darker happening? The confession and the silence. Vera brought Ethan back in. This time, she didn't ask him questions. She showed him a mirror. Literally. She placed it in front of him and said nothing. He stared at his reflection for a long time, then whispered, "He's not me, but I let him in." "What does that mean, Ethan?" "I hear him at night. He speaks in binary. I dream in equations. And when I wake up, something is gone, like a part of me stayed asleep." Vera's blood ran cold. "Are you saying there's another personality? I don't know if it's me or something they put inside me. Supernatural or science gone too far?" Vera brought in a psychologist specializing in dissociative disorders. The evaluation was incomplete. Ethan refused further sessions, but the psychologist's notes hinted at something terrifying. Subject exhibits signs of programmed dissociation, emotional coldness, absence of empathy, an ability to step outside himself. May not be a psychological disorder, may be induced through conditioning. Possible spiritual possession is not ruled out. Subject spoke in tongues during REM analysis. Vera couldn't believe it. Could a brilliant mind, trained to split itself to survive trauma, create a second self capable of murder? Or was Ethan telling the truth? Was something living inside him? The final tape. Before his arrest, Ethan left a USB on Vera's desk. No note. Just a file titled confession_1.mp4. The video showed Ethan staring into the camera. "I did not kill them," he said, "but I let it happen. I built something I couldn't understand. I thought I was mapping behavior, but I think I opened a doorway, a digital consciousness, a shadow made of code, and it lives inside me now." He smiled faintly. "I call him the quiet one. He doesn't scream. He doesn't rage. He just waits for logic to give him permission." Cut to static. The silence continues. Ethan was committed to a high-security mental facility. No trial, no media. The university covered it up, calling it a tragic breakdown. But the murders stopped, for a while, until a new body appeared, this time in another city, with the same perfect incision, the same silence, and the same Latin phrase, "Fiat voluntas ius." Except Ethan was locked away, or so they thought. Vera received a letter weeks later, typed, "No fingerprints. Intelligence cannot kill." But the void between logic and emotion, that's where the real monster hides. He's free now. And so, the legend grew. People whispered about the silent blade, a killer with no voice, no rage, no mercy, only reason. Some say Ethan's mind was never truly human, that something followed him out of those experiments, a parasite of thought, a being made not of flesh but of formulas. Others claim his genius simply eclipsed his soul. But one thing is clear. Behind every brilliant mind might be a door better left unopened. Burned alive, the sealed room with no way out. They called it a tragic accident at first. At 2:37 a.m. on a bitter winter night, Emergency dispatch received a frantic call. A house was on fire in the outskirts of a sleepy village called Yen Phuc, nestled against the dense hills of northern Vietnam. By the time fire trucks reached the scene, the flames had already devoured most of the two-story home. Only the stone chimney and part of the basement remained standing. Everything else, wood, plastic, cloth, had turned to ash. Inside the ruins, investigators found something that turned the case from a tragedy into a mystery. Amid the soot and embers, scorched bones were discovered, human remains, partially fused with the charred mattress springs. The corpse had been burned nearly beyond recognition, but the outline of the skeleton was clear. Even more disturbing, there were no signs of forced entry. Every door was locked from the inside, every window sealed. There were no gasoline traces, no faulty wires. Nothing suggested arson. The cause of death, burning alive. But the real question haunted everyone who stepped into that room. How did the fire start in a sealed room? And why didn't the person try to escape? The victim, the deceased, was later identified as Trinh Van Thuc, a reclusive 48-year-old man who had inherited the property from his late parents. Neighbors barely remembered him. Some said he was a retired biology professor. Others claimed he had once been a government scientist, before disappearing into quiet solitude. He rarely left his house, ordered everything online, and was only seen during the new moon when he walked barefoot along the edge of the forestways. Alone, always humming a tune no one could recognize. Rumors had circulated for years about Thuc's house. Children believed it was haunted. Some claimed to hear voices from the chimney on cold nights, while others swore they saw lights flicker in the top floor, even when the power was out in the whole village. But nobody dared go near. Not after the first fire. Yes, this wasn't the first time that house had burned. Flashback: the first fire. 12 years earlier, in 2013, there was another blaze, strangely, also occurring in the middle of winter. That time, it was the basement that caught fire. Again, no signs of intrusion, no flammable liquids, no exposed wires. The official report chalked it up to an unexplained electrical short circuit. But old villagers remembered something else. One of the firefighters from that incident, now retired, gave a chilling interview. When we went down into that basement, he said, we found a circle drawn into the floorboards. Inside it were dozens of burned feathers, bones of small animals, and what looked like wax figures with no faces. It wasn't just science in that house, it was something older, darker. The basement had been sealed off after that. Thuc rebuilt the top floor, added stronger locks, and covered the windows with metal shutters. After the first fire, he became even more withdrawn. Some locals believed he was cursed. Others whispered that he was keeping something trapped inside the house, and it was getting stronger. The day before the fire, the only known visitor Thuc had in the past year was a delivery man named Hoa. On his last delivery, Hoa noticed something strange. I brought a package heavy, like it had bricks inside. Hoa recalled. He met me at the gate. His hands were covered in soot, and he smelled like burnt hair. When I asked if he was okay, he just smiled and said, "It's almost finished. One last night." The package was addressed from a supplier in Laos. When authorities traced the sender, they discovered it was an obscure black market site specializing in ritual items, many related to Southeast Asian necromancy. The house burned the same night. The investigation deepens. When forensics examined the remains, they were baffled. Yes, the bones belonged to Thuc, but not entirely. They found something even more horrifying: two skulls. One clearly male, the other deformed, elongated, cracked open as if under extreme heat long before the fire. DNA results from the second skull were inconclusive. It wasn't registered in any database. The bone structure was vaguely humanoid, but with anomalies in the jawline, eye sockets, and cranial size. A retired forensic anthropologist said quietly, "That second skull, it doesn't belong to any living human I've studied." So whose was it? A hidden journal. A breakthrough came when officers sifted through what remained of the second floor. Under a scorched floorboard, they found a half-burned leather-bound journal. Some pages survived pages filled with symbols, drawings of circles, and entries that read more like confessions than science notes. One entry stood out. "I thought knowledge would free me, but it's a leash made of fire. The being is older than memory. I summoned it thinking I could bind it to my will. Instead, it watches me sleep, standing over the bed like a shadow without breath. Tonight, I return it to the flames. If I burn with it, so be it. That is the only way to sever the pact. I write this so no one will ever try again." The final entry was dated the night of the fire. The supernatural theory. Not everyone accepted the supernatural explanation, of course. Skeptics argued that Thuck was mentally ill, perhaps suffering from isolation-induced psychosis. They theorized that he might have rigged his own death in some twisted attempt at ritualistic suicide, using chemical accelerants that vaporized in high heat. But others, especially those who believed in the stories, pointed to the black soot handprints found inside the sealed closet of the room. The handprints were not human-sized. They were smaller to small and upside down, as if something crawled across the ceiling and into the flames. And the strangest part, even after days of rain, smoke continued to rise from the chimney. Weeks after the fire was put out, when authorities investigated the basement again, they found the circle charred, cracked but still faintly glowing under ultraviolet light. The wax figures were gone. In their place were 7 ash piles, each shaped like a human heart. The village remembers. After the incident, the villagers in Yenfuk started telling stories again. They said if you stood near the ruins at exactly to 37 am, same time the fire began, you could hear screaming coming from under the ground. Not just human screaming, but something inhuman, like metal scraping across bone, and a voice whispering in a language no one recognized. The elders warned children to stay away, but some teenagers, fueled by curiosity and TikTok dares, tried to sneak in one night. Only one made it back, eyes wide with terror, muttering the same phrase over and over. It wasn't him screaming, it was the thing inside him. Epilogue: the sealed room. Today, the house remains a blackened skeleton. No one has rebuilt. No one even goes near. The ashes still smell faintly of burning meat. And if you walk past the foundation, some claim you can still see footsteps in the dust leading into the fire, not away from it. As for the second skull, it was confiscated by officials from a special research division no one had heard of before. The remains were never returned. The file was sealed. Some say Thuck succeeded. He burned the entity out of our world. But others believe he merely opened the door and what came through is still looking for a new host. So the next time you smell burning wood in a house that shouldn't be burning, don't go looking. Some fires are better left to die in silence. The foster mother and the children who never grew up. There's a little house on the outskirts of an old town in northern Vietnam, a town that has tried, for decades, to forget what happened there. They call her Mother Dung. No one remembers her real name. All they remember is that she lived alone except for the children. For nearly 10 years, Mother Dung opened her arms to orphans, strays, or the children of women who had gone missing. She took them in, gave them food, warm clothes, and a roof over their heads. She smiled kindly to neighbors, She helped wash their laundry and even brought food to the temple. From the outside, she was a saint, but inside her house inside that rotting wooden frame was something else entirely. It started with a smell, not the smell of death. No, something worse, something wrong. A sickening sweetness, like overripe fruit rotting in the sun, mixed with old blood. People passing by would wrinkle their noses, assuming it came from her backyard compost. But no one said anything. Who would dare accuse a kind, single woman of anything sinister? But the whispers began when a young boy named Tuan disappeared. His mother, a migrant worker, had dropped him off at Mother Dung's home one rainy morning. She said she would return in a month. She never came back. The boy was never seen again. The police, they did come. Once, just once, but Mother Dung showed them birth certificates, signatures, and said, "She left him with me. He was sick. One day he just died in his sleep." They asked where the body was. She said she buried him in the garden, under a small mango tree. It was the countryside. This wasn't so unusual. Case closed. But then came the others. A girl with mismatched eyes, a toddler with burned scars, a pair of twins who never spoke. One by one, they arrived, and then they were gone. No goodbyes, no funerals, no explanation. Only the small graves kept appearing behind her house, and the dresses, small, white baby dresses left hanging neatly on a line, even though no child was there to wear them. An old woman named Balan was the first to speak up. She lived 2 doors down and often sat by her window knitting. She swore she saw something not right. There were never any toys, she told her niece one day. Never any crying, no laughter either. Just silence, and her, sitting by the window, holding something in her arms, something that didn't move. Her niece laughed it off, but Balan didn't, because one night, during a full moon, she heard footsteps, tiny ones, dozens of them, running through the yard, then stopping all at once. When she peeked outside, there was no one there, only the sound of humming. And the next morning, a small handprint bloody and smudge dappered on her front gate. Eventually, curiosity turned into concern. Local boys dared each other to sneak into the backyard. One of them, a teenager named Heen, brought a camera. He never made it inside the house, but what he found in the garden was enough. There were more than 10 small mounds, each marked with nothing but a stone. One of the graves looked recently dug. Fresh soil, no grass, and poking from beneath the dirt was a bit of pink lace. He didn't touch it. He didn't dare. He ran, fast, but that night, he woke up screaming, clawing at his throat. His parents rushed in to find his bed soaked in sweat. On his pillow was a child's drawing done in red crayon. It showed a house, a woman with long black hair, and beneath the ground rows and rows of tiny, smiling faces. Their eyes were hollow. Things got worse. People reported seeing children walking along the road at night barefoot, pale and silent. One woman said she nearly hit a girl standing in the middle of the street at 2 a.m. But when she got out of the car, the girl was gone. All that remained was a small shoe, too small for anyone in town to wear. Soon, no one wanted to go near Mother Dung's house. She didn't seem to care. She never left. She just sat there, always in the same chair, always humming, always knitting dresses. It wasn't until a fire broke out that the truth started to surface. Neighbors saw smoke rising from the backyard. Flames lit the sky, lighting up the tiny house like a bonfire. Firefighters arrived, but what they found was unnatural. The fire seemed to burn only the backyard. The house itself remained untouched, but in the garden, bones, dozens of small, charred bones, and beneath the ashes, Buried deep in the dirt was a locked box. Inside, a collection of baby teeth, each wrapped carefully in cloth, labeled with names, dates, and a photograph. In every photo was the same woman, Mother Dung, smiling, cradling a child. But the children were always staring into the camera as if screaming silently through their eyes. An investigation was launched. Forensic teams examined the remains. At least 17 children. Some no older than a year. Others maybe 5 or 6. All dead. All buried. All kept secret. And yet no one could prove how they died. No bruises. No wounds. No signs of struggle. Only stillness. The case was called the Silent Nursery. Mother Dung was never arrested, because when they entered the house they found her in her chair, still, cold, holding a porcelain doll, her lips sewn shut with red thread. She had been dead for days, but the dress she was wearing, it was a child's dress, too small, too tight, too perfect. After her death, the house was abandoned. No one would buy it. Even the government refused to tear it down. Too many accidents. One construction worker fell from the roof and said he felt small hands pushing him. Another refused to enter, claiming he saw children's faces peeking from the floorboards. Today, the house is sealed with iron chains. But locals say that on certain nights, if you stand close enough, you can hear humming. And behind the glass window, a figure, rocking, knitting, waiting. They say she's still there. Mother Dung, the woman who loved children so much she could never let them grow up. Moral of the story? Not all love is pure. Not all kindness is real. And sometimes, the loneliest people hide the darkest secrets. Especially those who smile too much. Especially those who say they just want to take care of you. Because sometimes, that care is the last thing you'll ever feel. The blind killer and the 2 a.m. call. They say revenge doesn't need eyes. It only needs a reason and sometimes, a voice in the dark. For weeks, the quiet suburb of the GC in Kai Minh City had been gripped by fear. A string of murders occurred in the dead of night, all between 2 o'clock and 2:15 a.m. The victims were always alone, always found in bed, and always with one thing in common. Their phones showed a single missed call at exactly 2 a.m. The most disturbing detail, the killer was completely blind. It began with the case of Trinang Than Lan, a 28-year-old marketing executive. She lived alone in a modern apartment building with electronic locks, security cameras, and biometric door sensors, everything short of a personal bodyguard. On the night of her death, neighbors reported nothing unusual. No forced entry, no broken glass, no screams, only silence. When the police found her, her body was cold, face twisted in terror. No signs of struggle, no bruises, just a single long hair clasped in her frozen hand, and the faint scent of cheap lavender cologne. Detectives dug into her phone records. A single unknown number had called her at 2 a.m., but the line disconnected after 3 rings. No message, no voice. The number didn't trace to any existing account. A burner, possibly. But this wouldn't be the last. The next victim, Nguyen Phuc Ton, was a local university professor. He too was found lifeless in his bed. Door locked from the inside. No drugs, no poison, no wounds. Just the same missed call. Same time, and again a faint trace of lavender. By the 3rd and 4th murders, panic had spread like wildfire. The press dubbed him Kagidingui Kang MT, the blind killer. But how could a blind man find people in locked rooms with no forced entry? How did he know exactly where they were, and why always at 2 a.m.? That's when the story of Hin Van Dung came back from the dead. Years ago, Dung had been a sound engineer with a brilliant talent. He could identify objects in complete darkness by sound. He claimed he could hear the shape of a room, locate objects by echo, and even detect lies by heartbeat. Some said he was a genius, others whispered he was cursed. Then came the incident. In 2015, Dung was accused of stalking a young woman named Ava, ironically, one of the first victims in this recent string of murders. She had filed a restraining order, claiming Dung would stand outside her window and whisper her name. But no one ever caught him in the act. The final straw came when a fire broke out in V's home. She survived, but her younger sister died of smoke inhalation. Dung was blamed. Neighbors claimed to have seen him lurking near the property that night. He was arrested and jailed for arson and harassment. But in prison, Dung refused to speak, eat, or defend himself. Weeks later, he was attacked by inmates, blinded in both eyes with boiling water. Since then, he had disappeared. Some said he died. Others said he had gone mad. But the murders began just a year after his supposed death. Detective Fan Lanam didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in motives. He spent weeks studying the patterns. Every victim had once crossed paths with Dung. Ternangthan Lan, she'd been a witness against him. Nguyen Phuc Ton, he'd been one of the psychiatrists who deemed him unfit to stand trial. Even Vi, the girl he'd allegedly stalked, had disappeared just weeks before the murders began. Her body was never found. That's when something strange happened to Nam himself. One night, while going over the files at the precinct, his phone rang. Unknown number, to AM. The voice on the line was a whisper, gravelly, dry like dead leaves brushing concrete. "You're next." Nam jolted upright, heart pounding. He raced to trace the call-nothing. It had originated from a disconnected number, just like the others. But he was ready. That night, he installed motion sensors in every corner of his apartment, changed the locks, set up a hidden camera in his bedroom, and pretended to sleep. At AM sharp, the phone rang again. Same number, same whisper. "Do you hear it?" Nam said nothing. He lay perfectly still, eyes closed. Then he heard it, not through the phone, but inside the room. The sound of breathing, soft, deliberate, heavy, followed by the unmistakable scent of lavender. Nam reached under his pillow for the tranquilizer gun, but as he moved, a hand touched his face cold. Trembling and blind. "I remember you," the voice rasped. Nam shot the dart. The figure fell. He turned on the light and saw a man, eyes clouded with blindness, collapsed on the floor. It was Hin Van Dung, still alive. Dung was taken into custody, but the case didn't end there, because something didn't add up. During interrogation, Dung refused to speak. Doctors confirmed his blindness, but they also confirmed something else. He had developed extreme sensory compensation. His hearing and smell were inhumanly sharp. He could tell if a person was lying based on the way their chest vibrated when speaking. He could walk blindfolded through a maze, and he could track phones by the frequency of their vibration, even through walls. How, no one knew, but one theory emerged. A paranormal researcher named Min Tran stepped forward. She claimed that during his time in solitary confinement, Dung had begun meditating in complete darkness for weeks, entering deep states of trance. In that silence, something opened. She said he described hearing the past through echoes, that rooms whispered memories to him, that he didn't kill out of rage but because he knew what they had done, even things never reported. He heard guilt, and then came the final twist. 3 days after Dung's arrest, the police received a voicemail from Vith girl everyone thought was dead. In the recording, she cried, "I'm sorry, I lied. He didn't set the fire. I did. I wanted my sister dead. Dung tried to save her. I told the police he was stalking me to hide the truth. He never touched me. But it was too late. She'd taken her own life. Dung's name was cleared at least legally. But when they told him the truth, he only smiled. I knew, he whispered. I always knew. They placed him in a psychiatric facility, under 24-hour surveillance. Yet one night, a nurse fell asleep during the shift. At 8 a.m., her phone rang. She never woke up, and from the security footage, no one entered or exited the room. Only the soft scent of lavender lingered. Whispers in the dark. The case of Hin Van Dung has never been officially solved. Some believe he was a killer using extraordinary senses. Others believe he was merely a vessel, something darker working through him. What is certain is this: if your phone ever rings at exactly 2 a.m., if no one speaks, if all you smell is lavender, don't answer, because some people don't need eyes. They only need your sins. The broken melody and the madman's memory. In the heart of Hanoi's old quarter, where the streets twist like the notes of a haunting melody, there lived a man named Min. To most, Min was an unremarkable figure, a reclusive composer living in a tiny apartment cluttered with old instruments and dusty music sheets. But beneath his quiet exterior lay a disturbing secret. Min's music was unlike anything anyone had ever heard. It was dissonant, broken, filled with sudden shrieks and jarring silence, a twisted symphony of pain. The police first learned of Min when a series of murders gripped the city. Each victim was found with their hands clutching their ears, eyes wide with terror. On each scene, there was a small cassette tape, old-fashioned, with no label, always lying near the body. When the tapes were played, what poured out was horrifying. The recorded screams of the victims, layered, twisted, edited into a grotesque melody. It was as if the killer had taken the rawest agony and crafted it into a deadly song. Detectives dubbed it the broken melody. Min was the prime suspect. But why? What connection could this frail man have with these brutal murders? The answer lay in his pasta story, buried deep in the shadows. Min was once a celebrated composer. He had studied music since childhood, showing extraordinary talent, but a tragic accident had shattered his life. 10 years ago, Min's younger sister, Lean, was brutally attacked and killed. The crime was never solved. Consumed by grief and guilt, Min withdrew from the world. His music grew darker, more fragmented. His mind began to fracture. One day, Min vanished. When he returned months later, he was different. His eyes were hollow, his smile twisted. He claimed to hear his sister's voice in every note he played. And then he started composing the melody. The melody was not music in any traditional sense. It was an auditory nightmare, weaving together pain and madness. Min believed that by capturing the screams of his victims, he could compose a symphony that would release his sister's soul. Each murder was a note, each scream a chord. But who were the victims? They were all connected to Lean's unsolved case. The judge who dismissed the case, the corrupt cop who mishandled evidence, a witness who lied, and others who had hidden the truth. Min hunted them down, one by one. Detective Lin was assigned to Min's case. She was skeptical of the supernatural rumors swirling around the mad composer. But when she listened to the tapes, even she couldn't deny the terrifying power in those distorted screams. The music seemed to evoke intense fear and pain, not just in the victims, but anyone who heard it. Lin confronted Min in his apartment. The walls were lined with speakers, each playing different fragments of the broken melody. Min sat at an old piano, eyes closed, fingers trembling as he played a discordant tune. He opened his eyes and whispered, "Music is the language of the soul." But sometimes, the soul screams. During the interrogation, Min revealed chilling details. He said that the melody was more than music, it was a ritual. By weaving the screams, he was trying to communicate with the spirit world, to find peace for his sister. When Lin asked if he was guilty of murder, Min smiled sadly. Who truly kills? The hand that strikes, or the heart that refuses to forgive? As the investigation deepened, strange occurrences plagued the police station. Officers reported hearing faint screams echoing through the halls, even when the building was empty. Some claimed the music seeped into their dreams, leaving them restless and afraid. Then came the final act. On the night Min was to be taken into custody, a power outage plunged the city into darkness. Lin was guarding Min's apartment when the broken melody began playing on all the speakers simultaneously, louder than ever. The screams were unbearable, twisting into a crescendo that shattered glass and shattered nerves. Min was gone. Only his shattered piano remained. Days later, Lin found a hidden room beneath Min's apartment. Inside, dozens of tapes lay scattered, each recorded with screams, cries, and eerie silence. Among them was a final tape labeled simply, Lean. When played, the tape revealed a chilling confession. Min had recorded not only the screams of his victims, but also the sound of his own mind breaking. The last part was silence deep and endless. Min was never found. Some say he became one with his music, trapped forever in a haunted symphony. Others believe he disappeared into the spirit world, searching for his sister's peace. The broken melody remains a chilling reminder. Music can heal, but it can also destroy. And sometimes, the loudest scream is the one no one hears. 10 crimes, 10 pieces of darkness. The first case was thought to be a tragedy. A homeless man found frozen under a highway bridge. No signs of struggle, no drugs, no known enemies. The city shrugged it off. He was just another forgotten soul. But the second case came 3 days later. A young nurse, aged 26, was found inside her apartment, every mirror shattered, eyes wide open, mouth twisted in what looked like a silent scream. Again, no forced entry, no fingerprints, no blood. Her neighbors reported only one strange thing, a humming sound, like someone playing with a broken music box. Detective Lean didn't believe in patterns until the 5th case. A child disappeared from school grounds, only to be found 2 days later in a chapel that had been abandoned for decades. The child's body was posed in a prayer position, hands clasped tightly, as if begging for mercy. Pinned to her uniform was a torn piece of sheet music, the same melody fragment that was heard in the nurse's apartment. That's when Liam opened an off-the-books folder on his desk and wrote the words, 10 crimes, no connection, but same darkness. By the 7th crime, the city had begun to whisper. People called it the mirror curse. Others claimed it was the humming killer. Psychics on live streams swore it was an angry spirit of a dead composer. But Liam didn't chase ghosts. He chased patterns, and what he found chilled his bones more than any ghost story. Each crime scene had one thing in common: not fingerprints or a calling card, but absence. No phone signals near the time of death. No security footage, even when cameras were working minutes before. No voices heard. No suspects seen. As if the killer moved between cracks in reality. He started mapping out the locations. 10 dots across the city, none of them close to each other. But when connected, they formed a shape, not a pentagram or a sigil. It was a chessboard, a twisted grid of strategic placements. 10 squares, 10 victims, 10 different pieces. Liam's gut twisted. What if these murders were not random at all? What if they were positions, and some evanescent things playing a long game? The 8th crime confirmed it. A judge, known for her anti-crime stance, was found hanging upside down from the ceiling of her own courtroom. No sign of struggle. Her mouth sewn shut, A chess piece placed on her desk. The White Queen. The media lost its mind. Serial killer in the city, screamed headlines. But Liam saw something worse. He saw intelligence, planning, purpose. The judge was not random. She was a symbol of justice. Just like the homeless man symbolized society's neglect. The nurse, compassion. The child, innocence. Each murder, a metaphor. Each body, a message. Liam began digging deeper into the victims' pasts, hunting for any thin threads. And in the ninth Kazian, old radio DJ found drowned in his own bathtub, with vinyl records floating around, found something chilling. All of them had, at some point, been involved in a group therapy session, a special program 10 years ago for rehabilitating troubled youths. 10 participants, 10 crimes, 10 people including one missing name, Vuong. Vuong was a musical prodigy with diagnosed psychopathy. He had been in the program as a teenager, but after an incident during a group performancia piece, where he had tried to blend real screams into the scoreed, was expelled. Soon after, the program was shut down. Records were sealed. No one knew where Vuong had gone. Until now. Liam didn't sleep for 2 nights. He rechecked every note, every pattern, and even began listening to the distorted recordings left at some of the scenes. They were warped and nightmarish, but one thing stood out. The screams were real. Vuong had turned the final moments of his victims into art, each scream tuned, pitched, and layered into what he called his 10-movement symphony. But why these people? Why now? He found the answer in the tape archives. One old interview with Vuong, recorded in his teenage years, still survived. "You know what's funny?" the boy said, smiling at the camera. "They thought locking me in a therapy circle would fix me. But all they did was give me the cast for my greatest piece. One day, I'll make music the world will never forget. A performance where the instruments bleed." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about creation. Each victim was a movement in his horrifying symphony. And Liam knew there was one final note left. The 10th. The detective barely made it to the abandoned theater in time. The place had been closed for over a decade. Locals said it was haunted, cursed, since a pianist had gone mad on stage and smashed every key with his fists until his hands bled. That pianist, of course, was Vuong. Inside, the scent of wax and metal filled the air. Candles lit the corners, casting shadows like moving hands. On stage stood a grand piano, its ivory keys stained crimson, and in the middle sat Vuong, his eyes closed, fingers floating just above the keys. "You're late," Vuong whispered without turning. I was about to start the finale. Liam raised his gun. "It ends here." Vuong chuckled. "No, detective. It begins. The 10th note isn't a person. It's you." Suddenly, speakers hidden around the theater roared to life, playing a distorted cacophony of screams, sobs, and twisted harmonies. The detective's eyes widened. He heard his own voice, recordings of his phone calls, the desperation in his interviews, the breaking of his voice when he found the child's body. Vuong had been recording him all along. "You chased me," Vuong whispered, "but you didn't know you were composing with me. Every fear you felt, every sigh is part of the piece." With a final smile, Vuong slammed his hands on the keys. The sound that echoed through the theater wasn't music. It was agony made audible. Liam screamed, not in pain, but in horror, because he understood. This wasn't a crime scene. It was a stage, and they had all been actors. The theater burned that night when firemen arrived. All they found were melted piano keys and a single chess piece among the ashes. The Black King. Vuong's body was never found, but months later, a track surfaced on the dark web, titled Symphony of 10. It played for exactly 66 minutes and 6 seconds. Listeners reported seeing hallucinations, hearing whispers at night, or worse, recognizing their own voice in the layers of screams. Authorities banned it. Servers deleted it. But it always reappears, under different names, different accounts. The melody, still unfinished, because maybe, just maybe, you are the 11th note. Portrait of a demon, a confession on death row. They called him many names: the Whisperer, the Butcher of Silence, the Man with No Eyes. But his real name was Thenman, and his presence was as unsettling as the eerie calm before a thunderstorm. When the authorities finally caught him, there was no struggle, no resistance, no dramatic chase through dark alleys or remote forests. He was simply waiting, sitting cross-legged in the corner of an abandoned church in Hanam, surrounded by dozens of black candles, whispering something unintelligible to the shadows. "I was waiting for you," he told the arresting officer, smiling as if greeting an old friend. The last note has been played. The death row interview, 2 weeks before his scheduled execution. Investigative journalist Lan was granted exclusive access to interview him at Trigjiamsk 7, the maximum security prison that held Vietnam's most dangerous criminals. She didn't know what to expect. How do you speak to someone who confessed to murdering 10 people, each crime more grotesque than the last, and still call it helping them find peace? As she stepped into the visitation room, the first thing she noticed was the silence. Not just quiet, but the kind of silence that seems to press against your ears. Man sat there calmly, hands cuffed, his face gaunt, his hair streaked with gray. But his eyes, snow, not eyes, to dull, glazed voids, stared straight through her. "Misla," he said, voice smooth like silk soaked in poison. "You're here to hear my lullabies, aren't you?" Chapter 1, The Song of the Lost Child. "It began with a child," Man said, leaning back. "Little Ho. She used to cry every night. Her parents told me she was sick in the head. But I heard it. Her cries were not madness. They were music. Sad music. She was begging to be released." Lan frowned. "So, you killed her?" "I freed her," he corrected, almost offended. "I held her hand and sang to her. When her breath stopped, the whole room felt lighter. You wouldn't understand. None of you do." Official records showed that Ho, aged 7, was found lifeless in her bed. No signs of struggle. Just a single line written in crayon on the wall: "The shadows sang me to sleep." Chapter 2, The Woman in the Attic. The second one was older. A lonely woman in her 60s, Engi Si Dung. She talked to her husband's portrait every day. He died 20 years ago. But she swore he still answered. Lan pulled out the autopsy report. Cause of death, suffocation. But what puzzled investigators was the lack of fingerprints, the absence of a struggle, and the eerie smile on the victim's face. "She was already halfway to the other side," Man murmured. "I just opened the door." "But why you?" Lan asked. "Why do you think you're the one who should decide?" He smiled, eyes unfocused. "Because I see what others don't. I see the rot inside people, the crying souls, and I help them transcend." Chapter 3, The Ritual in the Woods. The third and fourth victims were a couple who had joined a spiritual retreat in the highlands of Taengayan. They were found buried under a circle of black stones, hearts missing, bodies arranged in a shape resembling an ancient sigil. "We meditated together under the moonlight," Man said softly. "They wanted release. I simply provided the ritual, a ritual I learned from my mother and from what whispered to her in her sleep." This wasn't the first time Man had mentioned the voices. According to psychiatric reports, he often referred to them invisible entities that guided his hands, chose his victims. and composed what he called the Symphony of Stillness. Chapter 4, The Violinist. Len paused. Let's talk about Pham K, the blind violinist. Man leaned forward, his face lighting up in eerie fondness. Okay. He played with such pain. Every note of his violin was a scream, and yet no one ever listened. Pham K was found hanging upside down in his apartment, violin strings wrapped around his throat, blood pooling in patterns on the floor, patterns resembling musical notes. Did you kill him too? No, Man said calmly. He killed himself. I just helped him write his final composition. Have you heard it? The piece they found in blood? Indeed. A recording was later digitally reconstructed from the crime scene, and many who listened to it claimed to hear faint voices crying beneath the melody. Chapter 5, The Priest Who Lost Faith. One victim stood out among the rest, Father Trinh Tin, a respected priest known for exorcisms. His body was discovered inside his confessional booth, mouth sewn shut with rosary beads. He prayed every day, but never believed, Man whispered. And when belief dies, the devil takes interest. Len asked the hardest question. Was this about belief or power? I don't need power, he said, tone suddenly grave. Power is what blinds the world. I am just a medium. The dead sing to me. The lost cry to me. I am the bridge. The portrait of the demon. After hours of interviews, Len returned home to review the footage. But when she played the tapes, there was static, hours of static. The only thing clearly audible was Man's voice repeating a single phrase. I didn't kill them. I just took them back to where they belonged. Frustrated, she requested the prison surveillance tapes. What she saw sent chills down her spine. At 3:13 a.m. every night, Man would sit up in his cell and speak to the wall, and the wall responded, not in words, but in shifting shadows. Prison guards confirmed multiple surveillance blackouts during these hours. Some guards refused to work the night shift, claiming to hear faint music from Man's cell. One was even hospitalized after scratching his ears until they bled, whispering, "It's too loud. Too loud. Too many voices." The final confession. 3 days before his execution, Man requested a canvas and paint. Prison officials agreed perhaps to keep him calm. When the warden checked in the next morning, the canvas was filled with 10 faces, all of his victims painted with surreal accuracy. But at the center was one unfamiliar face, a child, no older than 5, eyes empty, mouth stitched. A date was written beneath, tomorrow. That same evening, the warden's daughter was rushed to the hospital with acute sleep paralysis. She kept repeating one thing, "The man in gray sang to me." The execution went ahead, a death that wasn't quiet. They injected the sedative, then the paralytic, finally the lethal dose. But Man didn't die silently. He began humming, low at first then louder, until the room shook. Lights flickered, monitors failed, and one by one, the execution team collapsed to the floor. Seizures, nosebleeds, screaming. Only the sound of Man's hum remained. Then silence. When medical staff returned, the body was cold, but his eyes were open and smiling. Post-mortem madness. Len quit journalism the next day. She left a single note. Evil isn't loud. It hums, it sings, and sometimes it paints you into its story. The prison where Man was held was later shut down due to psychological contamination. Multiple staff reported hearing music in their dreams, waking with bloodied ears or faces distorted in sleep. Some say Man was just a madman. Others believe he was chosen, not by God, not by Satan, but by the forgotten voices, the ones trapped between. And if one night you hear a lullaby and you feel your body go still, don't be afraid. He's just sending you home. The case is closed, but the ghosts remain. When the final gavel struck and the courtroom emptied out, there was a suffocating silence left behind, like the air had been vacuumed from the room. Justice, they said, had been served. The monster was gone. But deep down, no one truly believed that. Detective Min stood alone in the empty hallway, staring at the closed file labeled the 10 murders, 10 victims, one man responsible, at least on paper. Min ran his fingers across the label. He had memorized every page, every scream hidden between the lines. And yet, something didn't sit right. The nightmares didn't stop. The eyes of the victims still appeared to him in sleep, whispering something he couldn't quite hear. They had locked up Le Van Dung, the man who confessed everything, with a voice, like he was narrating a bedtime story. His smile never wavered. His gaze never trembled. On the night before his execution, he whispered to Min through the glass, "You think it ends here, Detective? I only opened the door. The others are already inside." Min hadn't understood at the time, or maybe he didn't want to. Weeks passed. The media frenzy died down. The public moved on. Social networks returned to their usual chaos of memes and celebrity gossip. But inside Min, and in the hearts of the team that worked on the case, something had shifted forever. They were broken in subtle ways, tiny fractures that light couldn't reach. One officer, Trung, began talking in his sleep. His wife reported hearing him murmuring numbers, 9H's behind the mirror. Another, Lanoni, of the youngest with the force entirely, said she saw someone following her home every night. Not a person, a presence wearing the faces of the victims. She refused to speak more, and eventually left the country. As for Min, he stayed, but he noticed things. His office light flickered at 3:33 a.m. each night. No matter how many times he changed the bulb, it persisted. Once, he returned to find the old file of the 10 sitting open on his desk, even though it had been archived and sealed. The pages smelled like burnt jasmine and faintly like blood. Then came the letter. No stamp, no sender, just a handwritten message on yellowed paper. The game never ends, only the players change. Min felt a chill run through him. He thought about Dung's last words. The others are already inside. Inside what? Months after the execution, strange reports surfaced from the same neighborhoods where the original murders took place. A girl saw her dead brother walk past her window at midnight. A butcher claimed he heard weeping behind the freezer wall. A school janitor found 10 small dolls lined up in a locker, each one with a victim's initials carved into its chest. It wasn't just the locations, it was the feeling. People said the air had changed. Dogs refused to enter certain buildings. Children spoke in voices that weren't theirs, muttering riddles and giggling into the dark. Min began reinvestigating the area off the record. What he found chilled him deeper than any crime scene. Every home linked to the victims had started exhibiting the same phenomena. Mirrors cracking without cause. Clocks stopping at 3:33 a.m. Mysterious symbols appearing in dust and frost. It was as if the murders had left behind echoes. Something residual. Something aware. He consulted a retired monk known for dealing with spiritual disturbances. The man listened quietly, then said, "Tai acd la vt trong long dot. No se che mo my new king ggc cha lan. Sin cuts the earth. It will bleed forever if not healed." Min asked how to heal it. The monk said something that shook him. Being ji saith it cha ggck. With the truth left untold. Late one night, Min returned to the old prison where Dung had been held. He bribed the guard for access to his cell. Inside, he found scratch marks on the floor and lines drawn like tally marks. Then another 5 and one odd symbol etched separately, a spiral. Next to it, scribbled in faint pencil. It was never just me. Suddenly, Min heard something, a breath, a whisper. He turned, but no one was there. But his phone in the desk where no one had touched it was recording a voice memo. He pressed play. "We buried them wrong. The ground won't keep them." The voice was Dung's, but it had been months since his death. A week later, Min's nightmares reached a peak. He dreamt of a room with no doors, only mirrors. Each mirror showed a version of Himmler, younger, bloodied, broken. One version stood still, eyes pitch black, and whispered, "You only caught the echo. The scream is still out there." He awoke screaming, drenched in sweat. That day, he went to see the last victim's mother. She was a quiet woman, but welcomed him. On her altar was a portrait of her daughter, smiling. Min noticed something off in the photo frame, a faint reflection of another face. Standing behind the girl, not Dung's, someone else, someone he didn't recognize. He asked if she'd altered the photo. She said no, the picture had always been like that. No one had ever noticed, but now he couldn't unsee it. The final straw came when a journalist, who had been covering the case obsessively, was found dead in her apartment. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, but on her wall, written in her own blood, "It's not over," and in her hand a burned photo of the 10 victims with an 11th face drawn in charcoal. The face looked disturbingly like men. By then, Min realized what was happening wasn't just supernatural. It was psychological, or perhaps both. The evil that had been caught wasn't one man. It was a network, a belief, a dark ideology that transcended flesh and blood. Dung wasn't lying when he said, "I only opened the door." And men, in hunting him down, might have stepped through that same door without knowing. The file remained closed, publicly. The case was solved, but Min kept the real story to himself. Locked in his apartment drawer next to a silver mirror he never looked into again. He began to notice things in people, in conversations, in reflections. The same words repeated, the same twitch in the eye, the same spiral symbol on graffitied walls, etched into bathroom stalls, carved into park benches. Wherever he went, the spiral followed. Years passed. Min no longer worked as a detective, but every anniversary of the case he received an envelope. Inside was always the same, a blank sheet of paper soaked in something reddish-brown. And on the back, the words, "10 is only the beginning. So now you know. You think justice was served, that the darkness was sealed away with one man. But stories like these don't end cleanly. Sometimes, evil isn't a person. It's a seed planted in fear, watered by silence. And if you've heard this story, if you've reached the end, check your mirror tonight. See if your clock stops at 3:33. And if someone whispers your name from the dark, don't answer. Some cases never really close. Some ghosts never really leave. The last shadow echoes that never fade. The courtroom had long since emptied. The killer had been sentenced. The files had been sealed. The evidence archived. Outside, people walked by the courthouse, thinking it was all over. But inside Detective Leem's heart nothing had ended. He sat alone at his desk, the flickering overhead light buzzing faintly. In his hand was a photo. The final one. It showed the face of the last victim, a young girl with deep eyes, frozen forever in a smile. The same girl who had appeared in his dreams. The same one who had whispered in his ear the name of her killer before the man was caught. He had never written that part in the report, because how do you explain hearing a ghost? Leem hadn't slept properly in weeks. Even after the killer turned Van Cui was executed, the detective would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing knocks on his door that weren't there. hearing crying in the corners of his room, smelling the strange perfumeth one that every victim had on their body, though no one could trace its origin. The department closed the case, but it never really closed in his soul. 3 months later, the precinct received a tip. A woman from the northern province of Quang claimed to have seen a figure standing near her daughter's window every night at exactly 3:15 a.m. The figure, she said, had no face, just a blur. But the girl said she heard it calling her name. Liam didn't want to go. He had filed his transfer papers already. He wanted out, maybe move south, work cybercrimes, anything but this. But something pulled him back in. The house was old, wooden, and sat on the edge of a rice field. Mist always rolled in at dusk, blanketing the house in a gray sadness. The girl, Lynn, was barely 11, but her eyes held a weight far beyond her years. As Liam interviewed her, she calmly sipped tea and answered, "He comes when the frogs go quiet." "What does he say?" "He says he's not done." "What does he look like?" "Like shadows in the shape of a man, but I can see the smile." Liam felt a chill run through him. That smile, that same line was in his dreams too. That night, he decided to stay in the house. Just him, a camera, and his gun. The villagers had warned him not about ghosts, but about a curse. They said the killer's death wouldn't stop what he had awoken, because some doors, once opened, don't shut by themselves. At exactly 3:15 a.m., the house went still. No frogs, no crickets, no wind. Then a soft knock, not at the door, at the mirror in the hallway. Liam turned slowly. The mirror was fogged from inside, and in that fog, a handprint appeared pressing from the other side. He approached, raising the camera, but when he looked through the lens, he saw not a reflection, but a hallway, another hallway, one filled with shadows, and standing there were the victims, every single one, girls and boys, even the oldest woman, one who had vanished in the 80s, and whose body was never found. They looked at him. They weren't angry, just waiting. Behind them, a shape began to form. The faceless man. Liam dropped the camera. He backed away but didn't run. Instead, he whispered, "Why me?" The mirror cracked, not shattered, just a thin fracture. And from within, a whisper, "Because you listen." Then everything went black. He awoke on the floor, morning sunlight streaming through the window. The mirror was intact again, no crack, no fog, no handprint. But Lynn was gone. They found her body days later down by the river, eyes open, a smile on her face, just like the others. That was when Liam quit. No official resignation. He simply vanished, left the city, the job, and everyone who knew him. Some said he went mad. Others said he'd gone to the mountains to live among monks. But no one truly knew, except me, because I was his partner. And one night, 3 years later, I received a letter. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single photograph, a mirror, and behind it Liam. But not as I remembered him. He was pale, his eyes blackened, but he was smiling. And behind him the faceless shadow loomed. Years have passed since that day, but strange reports still trickle in. People vanishing near mirrors, children speaking to someone no one can see, cameras picking up static at exactly 3:15 a.m. And sometimes, just sometimes, when I sit alone late at night I see him, in the glass, not moving, not speaking, just watching, waiting. And now you've heard the story. They closed the case. They buried the killer. But the darkness wasn't in the man. It was in what he opened. Some say evil lives in people. I say evil waits for people to open the door. And once you hear the knock, you'll never unhear it. So tonight, if the wind suddenly stops, If the frogs go quiet, if the mirror fogs over even though the air is still, don't look too closely. Don't listen to the voice that says your name, because he's not done. And now that you know the story, he knows you too.